Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jeff Freitas, and I'm the president of CFT, and I'd like to welcome you to another Upfront broadcast. Today, I want to talk about the terrible murders of 8 people, 6 of whom were Asian women, that occurred earlier this week in northern Georgia, and more broadly about the ongoing violence and racism against Asian American and Pacific Islander communities. In the wake of this terrible violence, CFT comes together as one to grieve for the Asian women who were killed in their workplace, targeted for their identity. We condemn the murders in Georgia and the spate of racist violence that is escalating throughout our country against Asian Americans. We denounce the framing of this tragedy that amplifies a racist, sexist, and dehumanizing narrative about Asian women. A year ago, the now ex-president of the United States used racist language to call COVID-19 things like the Kung Flu and the China virus, setting off, with his words, a year of brutal attacks against members of the Asian American and Pacific Islander communities. While violence against Asians in the United States has a long history that we cannot ignore, including the internment camps during World War II, the number and intensity of attacks have spiked. In the last year alone, 3,800 incidences in all 50 states were reported to the advocacy organization Stop AAPI Hate. As educators and classified professionals, we have a responsibility to use our voice to take a stand against the escalation of racist violence against our communities. We commit ourselves to fighting hate through education and to working with Asian American and Pacific Islander advocates in our state and local communities to address the crisis. I urge all CFT local unions and members to use the resource guides on anti-Asian violence that the Asian Pacific American Labor Alliance, or APALA, has released. We'll place a link to this important document in the comments section below. The resource guide includes actions you can take for community safety and resources you can use to talk to your community about anti-Asian violence and community safety. In February this year, CFT Vice Presidents Kent Wong of UCAFT and Arlene Inouye of UTLA joined the 14-member AFT Task Force for Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders. They were at an inaugural meeting to discuss raising the visibility and urgent issues impacting AAPI members and their communities. Issues like the rise of anti-Asian racism, including vicious attempts to blame Chinese Americans for the coronavirus pandemic. As this national group at AFT continues to meet, we pledge our commitment to doing the work to stop Asian American and Pacific Islander hate, starting with ensuring that students across the country are taught an expansive curriculum that includes the history of xenophobia, and hate crimes against the community, as well as celebrating Asian American and Pacific Islander culture and history. And we continue to stand by our educators and classified professionals who have brought anti-racist curriculum into the classroom. And we pledge to continue this work and support students, teachers, faculty, classified professionals by fostering safe places to learn and work. In our statement earlier this week, we included a quote from UTLA Secretary and CFT Vice President Arlene Inouye. In the statement, she said, quote, "It's so important that the horrific murder and ongoing violence on Asian and Pacific Islanders are seen in the context of a history of white supremacy, misogyny, and U.S. imperialism. Asian and Pacific women have been dealing with anti-Asian laws and systems, dehumanization, assaults, harassment, and the model minority myth all our lives. This is the time for all of us to unite and abolish these systems and structures of oppression that impact upon not only Asian American and Pacific Islanders, but all people of color in this country." We stand with you, Arlene. CFT is there to fight by your side. With that, I would like to close this upfront broadcast with a moment of silence in honor of those who have lost their lives to hate, and specifically to the 8 people killed this week in Georgia. Thank you in joining me in that moment of silence. Thank you for joining me today on this broadcast. Please stay safe and take care of those around you. Good night.